From Tallahassee, Florida's capital city, North Florida Baptist Church presents the Family Bible Hour.
We've all heard the story of the prodigal son, how he went to find his own way. Then he found out later he deceived himself, then determined that he could not stay. We've heard a lot of preaching and singing on the matter, and I'm happy he decided to change. But without the open arms at the end of the road, his decision would have been in vain. What about the prodigal's father? What about the grace he showed? What about his love and forgiveness when the prodigal came back home? What about the prodigal's father came a-running to meet his son? What about a great celebration when the prodigal's journey was done? What about the prodigal's father? What about the prodigal's father? The story in the Bible could have been about me. I was giving this world a try. I was hanging by a thread at the end of the rope, and I was trying so hard to climb. Then I finally made a choice, gave up, and came home. Was there ever really any doubt? My father would be waiting, and that's the real meaning of the story I'm talking about. What about the prodigal's father? What about the grace he showed? What about his love and forgiveness when the prodigal came back home? What about the prodigal's father came a-running to meet his son? What about a great celebration when the prodigal's journey was done? What about the prodigal's father came a-running to meet his son? What about a great celebration when the prodigal's journey was done? What about the prodigal's father? What about the prodigal's father? What about the prodigal's father? Sing about the grace he showed. Talk about his love and forgiveness when the prodigal came back home. What about the prodigal's father came a-running to meet his son? What about a great celebration when the prodigal's journey was done? What about the prodigal's father came a-running to meet his son? What about a great celebration when the prodigal's journey was done? What about the prodigal's father? What about the prodigal's father? What about the prodigal's father?
That was wonderful. I love to hear Mike Parker sing. He has this, he just has a unique way about him, and I just really enjoy hearing him sing. Well, I'd like to for you to take your Bibles and to turn to Proverbs chapter 22, and we're going to look at verse 6. The title of the message today, this is number 4 in our parenting series, and the title of the message today is simply Training Your Child. Here's an interesting little group of facts. A study showed that if both mom and dad attend church regularly, 72% of their children will remain faithful in church. If only dad attends church, then 55% will remain faithful. Here's an interesting fall off. If only mom, then 15% remain faithful. If neither attend regularly, only 6% remain faithful. The example of parents, particularly fathers, is so important in training our children. And as you've heard me say many times, and will hear me say again, more is caught than taught. The Bible says in Proverbs 22 and verse 6, Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, the phrase, the way he should go, means conformable to his way. Train up a child conformable to his way. Each child has a different way. Each child is different. There are certain nuances of a child's personality and makeup that should be considered in training our children individually. However, we do have guidelines to follow, and for every child, and those are the biblical principles of how parents should train their children. Now, let me make sure you understand the meaning of the verse. The meaning of the verse says, train up a child. Now, there is a standard in training the child. It is the Bible. In the way that he should go means conformable to his way. Here's what that means. That means if you have, as Mark and Clara May do, 5 children, that there is one standard for child training, and that is biblical standard of child training. However, those children have 5 different ways. They have 5 different individual personalities, and you've already discovered that for one child this works, and for another child this works, because they are different. We train up our children conformable to their ways. Many parents do not train their children because they do not know what child training really is. I want to give you an idea of how to see child training and help you to understand this, that every child has training. It may be training in the right direction, or it may be training in the wrong direction, but make no mistake about it, all children are trained. Even children who are neglected are trained by the neglect. We either train our children in a way that is acceptable to God, or a way that is not acceptable to God, a way that is right for their way, or a way that is not right. And I want to give you just 2 main points in the message today. First of all, we're going to see training defined, and then training derailed. What is child training? And then how do you derail child training? We still have several messages. We're certainly going to tell you how you keep the child training on track, but today we're going to talk about how it can be derailed. First of all, training defined. In the most basic understanding, training is that combined process of instructions and actions that result in achieving the desired behavior of the trainer by the one being trained. Now, I can say that again. I'll say it slower. It is that combined process of instruction and action resulting in achieving the desired behavior of the trainer by the one being trained. Training has a wide variety of application. We often can train or try to train the growth of a plant. We train a vine to run up a rope or a trellis. We train the growth of a plant. We train athletes. We train animals. We train employees. We train our hair to lay down or our hair to stand up. When I was a kid, I had a flat top, and I trained my hair to stand up. When I grew older, I let it grow, and then I had to train my hair to lay down. So child training is a process of instruction and actions that results in reaching the behavioral and attitude goals that the parent has for the child. In other words, you have goals for your children. Training is what helps you to get to those goals that you have for your children. A very important point to remember is that successful training has not occurred until those goals are attained. That is a stark reality. We certainly haven't trained a dog to sit if it runs away when we say sit. We haven't trained the plant to climb the string if it continues to grow along the ground. We haven't trained our children to achieve our positive goals for them if they are not demonstrating the actions and attitudes that we expect. We just haven't trained them for our goals. They've been trained, but not for the goals that we thought we were training them for. Child training is a complex activity. It requires many components and has a lot of different ingredients. Instruction alone is not training. Exposure to a good home is more positive than negative, but that's not training if that's all that there is, just exposure to a good home. A proper moral atmosphere is important to training, but that isn't all there is to training our children. Even attending church and participating in church and going to the right schools and so forth and having the right friends, those are all important ingredients in child training, but they're not the total of child training. Remember this, just because we have children and earn enough to provide for them doesn't mean that we are prepared as we should be in training our child or training our children. There are a lot of strange ideas today. We think that if we have enough to provide, that means that we are good parents. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're good parents. It certainly doesn't mean that we are training our children. Training a child is different than providing a place for them to grow until they leave home. In fact, that is the raising part of a child. Providing a place for them to be until they leave home is the raising of a child. And before we get too excited about that, you should understand that we raise corn and beans and chickens and hogs. But children must be trained. It's not just enough to raise children. In the text, the word train means to initiate and dedicate. To train up a child is to begin a child on a course that he or she will continue to follow after the training stage of the child. They will continue on that course. The path that should be followed is obviously God's path. We don't have to be trained to follow our natural bent. We do that anyway. I said to you before, and I'll probably say again, you don't have to train your children to lie. They just lie. You don't have to train them to misbehave. They just misbehave. You don't have to train them in selfishness. They're just naturally selfish. Training a child is a whole different thing. And it means that we have to train them away from the natural bent of their lives. Remember, we're born in sin. We have a sin nature. Now, we looked at little Xander up here earlier, and everybody loved it when the preacher picked up Xander and he gave a little faint smile. I think that was perhaps terror, but it looked like a smile. And everybody loved it. And what a sweet child. And Xander is a sweet child. There's no question about it. Xander's a sweet child. But I'm going to tell you something about your sweet child. He has a sin nature. Now, he is not yet responsible for his sin nature, but he will be someday. Because all children are born with a sin nature. The word train is taken from a Hebrew root word that means to narrow or to restrict. The command then is for parents to restrict the path of their children so that they will follow a path, get this, that isn't natural for them. Preacher, are you saying that we should teach our children to do something that is unnatural for them? Absolutely. Obey. That is unnatural for a child. This may seem odd, but the whole point of training is to develop an action or a reaction or process that doesn't come naturally. When I think about that, I think about golf. Every little boy and a lot of little girls have played some kind of bat and ball game. And we learn to swing a baseball bat in a certain way, and it becomes like second nature to us. And you know what we do? When we take up golf, we transfer that natural baseball swing to golf. Here's the thing about golf. It is completely different than anything else. It is a whole different kind of swing. So much so that you have to retrain your body to think differently about how you swing. And you don't swing like this. It's a completely different swing, and you have to turn from your waist. And I'm telling you this as though I know how to do it. I don't. But you have to retrain your body into how to swing. It goes against nature. If somebody has a natural swing, I've heard of people say, well, you have a natural swing. To me, that means they may have never played baseball. They may have never played in the backyard, wiffle ball or whatever, because that's a whole different thing. The point that I'm making is this. The path of God is not harmonious with the natural fallen nature of man. It is a completely different nature from the fallen nature of man, training a child to follow God. The natural bent of a child is to disobey, to disrespect, and so on. Here's what the Bible says in Romans 8 and verse 7. For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot be. Now, what is that? That's the mind that's set on the flesh. How many of us have a mind set on the flesh when we're born and when we were children? All of us. How many of us struggle with it every single day? All of us. Why? Because our natural bent is not to have the spiritual laws inside of us. Our natural bent is to obey the law of the flesh. And remember this, directing or restraining our children for the sake of training will not prevent them from developing their individual personalities, their preferences, or their calling. What the world has sold us was you don't want to stifle the creativity of your child, and so you should not so restrain them or restrict them in their behavior that it stifles their creativity. It does not stifle their creativity. If anything, it creates for them boundaries so that they understand how their creativity is supposed to work and not to jump the fence and get outside of creativity. Look, let me put it to you this way. This is not in my script, but or in my message, but let me put it to you this way. If you have a fence, and inside of the fence are sheep, and outside the fence are wolves, where are the sheep safe to develop their sheepness? Are they safe inside the fence or outside the fence? Well, it's inside the fence. And the reason is because that the shepherd has created for those sheep an atmosphere of safety so that they can develop and they can be the very best sheep that they can possibly be. If they get outside the fence, there's going to be one thing on their mind: getting away from the wolf. Staying away from the wolf. They can't be creative out there. They can't develop their natural sheep lives out there. They can't be productive as sheep out there. What they're going to be is they're going to be protective of themselves, and soon they'll be eaten by the wolves. So when we talk about child training, we're not talking about restricting our children from developing as they should. We're talking about freeing our children to develop as they should. It provides rather than prevents individuality. It helps them to make the correct turns and decisions on the path of life. In child training, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job. That's what we want to do. We want to restrict their path. We want to set them on the path. Then we want to pull back once they have left our influence of our daily influence of our home, and we want to see them follow that path. Here's the frustration. The frustration is when they are not set on the path and you see them out there not following the path that you intended, and you run down there somewhere about age 25 or 30 or 35 and try to get them back on the path that they never got on when they were in the home. I know that's tough stuff, but it's the truth. And I say that not as a perfect dad, but I say that as a dad who has 3 adult sons. And as far as I know, no child has ever grown to be an adult and been absolutely perfect in every step of the path that the parents had prescribed. I also know this. I know that no parent has ever prescribed the exact path that ought to be prescribed. We all have our bents and our problems and our personality quirks. In child training, we want to no longer have to train our children. We want to get them out there where they're doing their own thing. We want to be in a position to enjoy the choices and accomplishments of our children's adult life. A sweet, helpful, courteous child has been trained to be a sweet, helpful, courteous child. You might say of your child, well, my child has always been just the sweetest and most helpful and courteous thing. That's just not true. I've just spent several days with my grandson Bradford, and then a few days with my other grandson Harper, who's just a little tiny thing. Well, he's not tiny, he's giant, but he's 6 months old. And one day, Bradford, in fact, it was, I don't know, a couple of days ago, Bradford looked at me and he said, "Pops, what does courteous mean?" And I wanted to say, well, I wanted to take him to a mirror and say, "You see that boy right there? It's the opposite of that boy right there is what courteous means." Our children aren't naturally courteous. Now, with this in mind, I want us to look at how child training can be derailed. That's what you understand what the training of a child is? It's not just feeding them. It's not just providing for them, not just making sure they have cool clothes, not just sending them to great schools. It's not all that. There is an involvement. There is setting a goal for your child to be some person that you want that child to be down the road, and making the decisions and course alterations along the way to get them on that path, so that when they walk out your door and you have to step back like this, you see that they are on that path. That's child training. You say, well, what if they go in the complete opposite direction? Then they were trained that way. I know, it's terrible. Let's talk about training derailed. Here's what Benjamin Franklin said. He said, "Any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do." So I am not criticizing your child training. I hope you're not criticizing my child training, because it's foolish to do so. We have our own problems. I have way too much going on in my family life to try to live your family's life. I just do. Now, does that mean your pastor's not here for you? Well, of course I'm here for you. But I'm not going to be sitting, you won't find me on the judgment panel of your household. I'm just not, that's not where I belong. Some parents raise their children in reaction to what they see in other parents, and in criticism of other parents, and in criticism of their own children. Training our children is a lifelong project, and there's always a danger of being derailed. But we want to be careful not to just live our lives in criticism. Here's some ways to derail your child. First of all, there is what I call default training. Some parents are good providers and they're prolific in procreation, but negligent in training their children. They take some approaches for which there's simply no excuse. Let me give you some approaches for which there's no excuse. There's no excuse. Not trying to be critical, just telling you the truth. There's no excuse for these kinds of child training. First of all, blind training. This is choosing to ignore the negative actions or traits of our children. Have you ever talked to someone who had a child that was completely out of control, just creating havoc? And didn't you think to yourself, what's wrong with these parents? What's wrong with them that they don't see what's going on with that kid? Are they just clueless? I love this. Someone has defined a brat as a child who acts like your own but belongs to someone else. Oftentimes we ignore the problem traits in our children that we see in ourselves. We don't want to see it in them because it's too painful. We see our own problems. To retrain our children in their table manners may be too painful for the parent that eats like a pig. You know, if you drop your head in your face, your head in your plate, Dad, and gobble it up, you know, you remember Christmas Story and the little kid named Randy that ate like a piggy, and you know, and Mom thought it was funny. He said, "Go ahead, snort like a piggy." And he snorted, and everybody laughed. You know, that's funny until it's a business lunch. And bless your sweetheart, I am old enough to have seen plenty of adults who ate like piggies when they were at home, and they still eat like piggies out in public. That's tough. Chiding a child for laziness is very hard to do from the couch. Honesty honestly, it is pretty hard to correct a gossiping child when we just got off the phone with a session of our own gossips. If you ignore the problems of your children, there is a reason that you do, and oftentimes the reason you ignore the problems of your children is because they are living who you are. If you ignore the issues your child has today, please understand this. Please be assured that someone is going to notice those issues later. You are not doing your child any favors. It may be a teacher who cannot control the child that you did not control. It may be an employer who cannot get them to be to be on time because they were trained at home that being on time was optional. Maybe it's the finance company who will notice that a man or a woman who didn't turn in their homework because their parents didn't make them do their homework, also doesn't pay their car note because they just associate one with the other. Ignore the problem if you will, but it is going to be noticed by someone, somewhere, at some point in your child's life. It is going to be there. No question about it. None whatsoever. Ignoring the problem is training. It's just poor training. It's training your child by default. Here's another default training mechanism, and that's what I call hypocritical training. I have already mentioned this, but here is a little more insight. Hypocritical training is when we over-criticize the faults we see in our children that actually we share in common with them. Now, I have 3 sons. They each have some wonderful qualities, and they each have some noticeable faults. I can tell you that some of the faults that they have in common with me. Some of the issues that they have are issues that I have. And the things, I will tell you this, the faults that I despise the most in my sons are the faults that I've despised the most in me. This is a sobering reality. It is impossible to train a child contrary to our own behavior. It's not hard to train a child contrary to your own behavior. It's not a challenge to train your child contrary to your own behavior. It's just impossible. You just can't do it. I've actually heard chain smokers talk about how they hope their children never take up this habit. I hope my kid I hope they never take this nasty habit up. Really? Then put that nasty habit down. They're going to do what you do. I'm here to tell you they're going to do what you do. You say, well, now, that's not necessarily true. My daddy or my so-and-so was an alcoholic, and I swore up and down that I was never going to touch that stuff. And God bless you, but what an awful way to learn not to touch that stuff. What a terrible way. Do you, seriously, I know I'm off into the other areas, but I love these other areas. You seriously want to train your children not to smoke by dying of lung cancer? Is that the way you want your children to learn? You want somebody to put their arm around your child at your casket and say, now see, never take that up. You remember Lucky Strikes? They should have been called 3 strikes. But that is just the thing. Folks, it applies to every aspect of our child training. I once had a mother of a teenage girl. This was a mom of a teenage girl. She called me with a goodbye conversation. Now, here's what I mean by that. It was very clear that she was making her last phone calls, and that this mom was ready to take her life. And I gave her all the reasons that she should want to live and so forth, and she just couldn't want to live. She just couldn't want to. And I could hear it. I mean, I've heard it so many times, and I could I could hear it. And we talked about the problems that she was going to create if she did this, and I'm not worth anything to anybody, and she just went on and on about how she wasn't worth anything to anybody. And then I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere with her. And so here's what I said to her. I said, okay, I'll just tell, and I named her daughter's name. I'll just tell her that you handled the problems of your life the way that really all problems should be handled when she faces them. That someday she's going to come and she's going to say, I just don't know what to do, and I can't tell her that her mom's a bad person or anything like that. I'm just going to tell her, well, your mom is just setting an example for you. So, someday, sweetheart, when you, get to this point, and it may not be at the age of your mom, it may be younger, this really is the way to handle your issues. And boy, did that mom ever get mad at me. She said, absolutely not. I said, well, I've got to. She said, why? I said, because that's what you're doing. It's a giant permission sign from you. Do this. When you have this kind of problem, do this. I said, is that what you're wanting to tell her? No, that's not what I'm wanting to tell her. I said, then don't do it. You say, that wasn't very pastorally. It was really effective. I think pastorally would have gotten her killed, to tell you the truth. But I just flat told it the way it was. And you know what? Today, as far as I can tell, she's happy. Her child is happy. Her daughter's growing up, and they have a good relationship as far as I can tell, and on it goes. Look, don't forget this. Little leopards have spots because big leopards have spots. Here's a third default training. That is timid training. I got to move on quickly. Some parents are just timid about enforcing their will on the child. They're just timid about it. I will tell you that you have to take charge of your child, and you can't be hesitant about it. Here are a few reasons that you might be hesitant to take charge in your child's life. Let me give them to you real quick. Number one, you're too preoccupied with your own problems. You're just too wrapped up in your own problems to deal with, with your kid's problem. Secondly, you're too preoccupied with your job or other pursuits. Sometimes people are so preoccupied with their job or other pursuits that they feel guilty about the way that they're raising their children, so they become very permissive with their children because they're never there. Maybe you get tired of correcting. You ever get tired of correcting? You ever said this, I just tune them out. I just tune them out. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because I can see it on your faces. Oh, no, that's me. Listen, you need to tune them up instead of tune them out. Sometimes people are just lazy. Here's one. You're afraid you'll lose your child's affection. You will not lose your child's affection by training them to respect you. You just won't. In default parenting, there are a lot of avenues leading to the wrong end. We've seen 3. Here's one more. That is delayed training. Some parents want to leave the correction to someone else. They hope somebody else will do it for them. They hope that, well, I'm hoping when this baby gets in school that this baby's going to be better. No, that baby's not going to be better. That baby's going to be in the principal's office every day. Well, I'm just hoping that when you know what that's like saying? that's like saying, I'm hoping that when my child gets married that they're going to start paying their bills. That's not going to happen. You can't delay that. You can't. I'm just hoping that one day they're going to grow out of this. What? Grow out of their sin nature? They're not going to grow out of their sin nature. That's with them forever. It is with them. You said, but what about salvation? They get a new nature that combats with their sin nature, but the sin nature is always doing battle. Oh, I got to hurry. So that is default training. Let me move very quickly to what I call no-fault training. There's some mistakes that we can make in child training that will affect the way that our children respond to authority. Here's one, the 3 strikes method. 1, 2. Seriously, really? 1, 2. You say, well, Pastor Ray, how'd you do it? Whap! 1. Can I get a witness, Paul? You know what 1, 2, 3 means? 1, she doesn't mean it. 2, he's just kidding. 3, let's see. Now, I'm serious. And again, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because I see the 1, 2, 3 offenders out in front of me right now. It's all over you. Can you imagine how this is training the children? What do you mean I'm fired? I didn't hear any counting. That bill doesn't mean anything. Second notice, psst. Third notice, yeah, we probably need to pay it. Look, honey, this was only the first time I cheated on you. You know how that really works? 1. That's the way that really works. And you say, well, I use 3 strikes and it's very effective. No, it's not. It's just not. Look, when your child is 40, they will still be expecting 1 and 2. And they're going to feel like they're mistreated if somebody didn't count for them before they drop the hammer. It's just the way that it is. You ever hire people at Publix that are expecting 1 and 2 before the... Yeah. They were trained that way at home. That's the way they were trained, is at the house. By the way, I would not want to be you teenagers. Because look, all numbers are gone at your house. It's going to be, but you're going to be better people for this. Just remember it down the road. Here's the second one, vocal training. And I don't mean, I don't mean that. I mean, they don't believe you when you speak in a normal tone because you've never reinforced anything that you spoke in a normal tone. Never. There's always had to be a loud voice, yelling, stop it! You say, Pastor Ray, you never yelled in your home? Oh, yes, I did. I did. And it was wrong, but I'm going to tell you this. I had opposite vocal training as well. You know in Star Wars, there's the Death Star? At the Ray house, there was the Death Stare. It went on something like this. Come over here. Get over here. Stand right there. No, stand right there. I scare myself with the Death Star. You can train your kids now. I'm telling you can train them. Just give it to them. Give them the Death Stare. I had a dog when I moved here. We had a dog named Rudy, who was and I know, Peter will probably get me for this, but I had a Death Stare. Rudy was a Dalmatian, which I really think they misspelled the name of that dog. But Rudy was a Dalmatian, and Rudy responded to the Death Stare. Paul, do you remember when I used to do this to Rudy? And that dog would. I never said anything to Rudy. We would hear Rudy crying in the middle of the night for nothing. She was dreaming of the stair. Here's the third no fault. That's the doormat. Maybe your children just take nothing into consideration that you say. You're just the doormat. Some parents are literally a joke to their kids. The parents are their peers. Even worse, they are disrespected peers. Remember this, your child is learning how to respond to all authority by the way your child is responding to you. All authority. The ultimate authority to whom they will respond is God, and they are learning to respond to God by the way they respond to you. The question is, do you want them to respond to God the way they respond to you? Do you want God to have to count to 3? You want God to be a doormat? Just there when you really need me? And then, by the way, that is the way I'm going to say most Christians treat God. He's just there when they really need him. Just there. They have a ceremonial crisis God. You know, God gets up, actually, he never slumbers or sleeps. God is with us every morning we get up and every night when we go to bed, and God is always available to us, and we ought not have to get to crisis mode to need God. Here's I think the fourth, and I believe this is the final thing. No, there's a couple more. Justification. Here's what really throws parents in this world today. The why question. I heard my grandson ask it. I can't tell you how many. Now, he didn't ask it of me because he knows I don't deal in why. but he asked it of everyone else. When something, he'll say, why? Isn't my child inquisitive? My child is so smart, they always want to know why before they do something. No, your child's such a little devil that he or she always wants to know why. I'm telling you. Look, I sometimes wish we did believe in infant baptism. I sometimes really wish that baptism did wash away the sins. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'd set me up a baptistry over at TMH and I would just slop them right through there. It just doesn't. You say, well, I want my child to always be able to come to me and ask why. Well, I understand that, and that's fine. That's okay. But I'm here to tell you, if your child has to find out why before they obey, not good. Because one of these days there's going to be a bus coming down the street, and you say, get out of the road, and they go, why? Well, because of that. Seriously. You say, Pastor Ray, aren't these extreme? Yes, but child training is extreme. It is an extreme thing. Did you ladies not go through extreme pain in birthing those children? That was a sign of things to come. It's painful. It's extreme. Maybe one of the reasons that dads don't take it so tough is that dads don't go through the birth process. Women, you can say amen if you want to. I know. I'll tell you what's funny. We had 2 children. One child weighed over 9 and 2 that weighed over 10. I think Nathan and Paul weighed over 10 and Matthew weighed over 9. I used to tell that. I used to say, yeah, we just had a baby and my wife, it's the sweetest thing. That baby weighed 10 pounds and 3 ounces, and all the women go, oh. You know what the men would say? So? They didn't go through any pain. All women identified with it. Oh. Well, raising a child to adult life is painful. And we add to our pain when we create situations. And let me finally get to the last one, and that is this. Asking for alibis. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful thing. This is one that every single one of us have done. Why did you do that? Here's what we're asking them to do. Make up a lie and say it to my face. Why did you take that away from your brother? Well, it was because this morning when I got up, there were shadows on the wall, and those shadows forecasted to me the way that my day was going to go. And they make up this fantastic lie. Or they'll just say, because he hit me. Did you hit him? No, I didn't hit him. Yes, he did too. So now the child's not only taken something from his brother, the child has now lied. But the problem with that is you punish the other kid because you can't believe you've got a lying child. Alibis. We ask them for alibis. Here's one. What were you thinking? I love that. I love the what were you thinking. There's a thing on the internet where this guy who's given this Christian seminar on couples talks about how men can think about nothing, and we can. Women say, what are you thinking about? Nothing. You got to be thinking about something. No, we're really thinking about nothing. One of the great joys of our lives is to be able to think about nothing. It's impossible. It's impossible to think about it. It is not impossible. It's preferable. We like it in here. Get out of our lives. We like the nothing box. What's it like in there? We don't want you to know. This belongs to us. It's just ours. Stay away. No girls allowed. What were you thinking, we ask our children? Nothing. Well, look, parenting is hard work. And it takes a lot of love and concentration and self-discipline. No one is automatically a good parent, and no one is always a bad parent. Your child has a way, and God knows it, and you need to know it too. And train up your child in the way that will work. It's what the Bible says. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart